Welcome to Exceptionally Speaking, the podcast where we explore how to better understand and support exceptional learners. I'm Dr. Meryl, and each week I sit down with dedicated educators, parents, and advocates to share real strategies, inspiring stories, and moments of hope. If you're enjoying these conversations or learning something new, please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Marisa Soto-Harrison, a longtime educator and a passionate advocate for profoundly gifted and twice exceptional learners. Marisa has spent more than 20 years in the field, and her journey began with her own gifted children. Both her personal and professional experiences have shaped her deep understanding of what these gifted and profoundly gifted learners need to truly thrive. In this episode, Marisa and I talk about the complexities of working with profoundly gifted students. We explore how high expectations can sometimes lead to underachievement or mental health challenges, why strong community support is so important for families, and how building authentic relationships with gifted students makes all the difference. We also discuss her next exciting project, a new online school called Sierra Gifted Environmental School, designed specifically for gifted, creative, and twice exceptional students. Her vision centers on meeting students where they are and creating educational experiences that actually work for them. You can find more information about Marisa and all of our guests at hex24press.com. Please enjoy Exceptionally Speaking with Dr. Marisa Soto-Harrison. Welcome, Marisa. It's so good to see you.
Hi, it's good to see you too.
Thanks for spending some time with me today. I'm really excited to talk to you about profoundly gifted students and really the work that you've been doing over the past few years. And I'd love to just start with, what's your journey been like? How did you get into gifted education? How did you land here? What's that been like for you?
Well, it really started because of my children. I never even knew what gifted was until my son was about 4 years old, and I took my first graduate class when we lived in Costa Rica. And there was a section on special education, and in there was a little few paragraphs on gifted ed. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, that sounds like my child. So, from there, I kind of knew more or less what it was about. And we ended up moving back to the States when he was 5 years old and went to kindergarten. And at that point, he got clinically depressed, and it was just a really terrible year. And after I had him evaluated and found out he was profoundly gifted, I realized that he was going to need something different, than what he had, because he just was not happy at all.
Yeah. And so for our listeners who maybe they're aware of giftedness and what that is, what do we really mean when we say profoundly gifted?
Okay, so profoundly gifted are going to be those individuals that score like 99.9 in the IQ bell curve. And really, they're just so much more intense than regular gifted people. They seem to have like an extra intensity to them in almost everything that they do.
Yeah. And so for you as a parent and as a family, what was education like for your kids? And did it work or not? How was it for them?
Well, I had a second child, and he's highly gifted and very 2E. But what I ended up having to do is just kind of go year to year. I mean, it sounds terrible, but I think you talk to most profoundly gifted parents, and their children probably had to have multiple changes throughout schooling. So we started out in private school, and then in first grade, we did a full-time gifted program at the public school. But I had to pull him out of that because I didn't really know at the time what was happening, but he has dysgraphia, and he was getting held in from recess because he couldn't write in his journal. And so,
Wow.
yeah. And the teacher just would say things like, I don't know what they did to him last year. Like she was just not a good fit for him. And she was really, really, having an impact on his self esteem. So, towards the end of first grade, we went ahead and started homeschooling and did that for a while until he had pretty much maxed out all the curriculum at the homeschool center that I was sending him to, and decided that he wanted to try college. So we signed him up for a math course at the community college, and it went fine. But in the end, he said, I don't want to do it again because I don't like being the center of attention. because
Okay.
everyone wanted to talk to him. Everyone was asking him, can we study together? I don't know. It was just awkward for him because they were, adults.
And so, did he return back to more homeschooling style or online, or what was it like after that?
Well, we moved to Reno in 2007, and we were part of the second group of Davidson Academy students. So, yeah, it was real small back then. There was 35 to start and 10 more the second years. It was, at that time, it was very small, like 45 kids. And it was a godsend for all of us, really. I mean, for us as parents, having that community, and for my son, just getting the challenge that he needed.
And what was different about the approach to learning through that program that really met his needs better?
Just the advanced levels that they were teaching at. For instance, when he was in seventh grade, he took a I don't know if you'd call it psychology, religion, but at any rate, it just really was at such a high level. And I actually personally don't think he probably should have taken it that early because it really caused some existential issues for him after that. But everything was just taught at such a high level and with rigor and depth. And just the fact of being around other people at the same intelligence level made a huge difference because everything was a challenge. And I remember at one point he told me, I never realized how little people expected of me until I came here. So,
Wow. Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It ended up being a good move for us because my younger son is highly gifted and he ended up being able to take advantage of the school within a school option for highly gifted kids in Washoe County in Reno, which is phenomenal. You know, they have layers of gifted education as you do in Colorado. And at that time, it was great. It was what we needed.
What advice would you give to parents who maybe are just learning that their child is PG or profoundly gifted in really just the upcoming years of support? What would be some advice you'd give to them?
Well, I would definitely try to find community. For us, it was the Davidson Institute and the Young Scholars Program. Um, that to me, that's really the key. I mean, you need to find people that understand what you're going through because it's not a typical journey that you see. There's not a lot of profoundly gifted people out there. The way you have to approach parenting is so unique that you need to have people that understand why you're making the decisions you are and make you not feel crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super important. And so, of course, the way we know each other is through the University of Denver and working on our doctorates at the same time. What led you to really seek an advanced degree and dive further into the world of profoundly gifted students?
After we moved away from Reno, I went back to South Florida and started a small program for high achieving and gifted students in South Florida. And I had that school for a few years with a good friend of mine. And about halfway through it, I decided that I wanted to grow the school more. So I would go back and get my doctorate, really to be more of an expert in the field and to grow the school.
And so you really honed in on the underachieving of profoundly gifted adolescents. And so what do we mean by underachieving? To whose standard? How did you define that in your work?
It's not about how well they do academically. It's more about them not measuring up to the built in expectations that they have for themselves or what they perceive are other people's expectations. And so, what ends up happening when the expectations are not met is a lot of mental health issues, social issues, a lot of rebellious attitudes, because they don't want to do, they just kind of check out.
In your study, you identified five major contributors to underachievement for profoundly gifted adolescents. So those were expectations, social issues, mental health issues, rebellion, and motivation. Which one of these really stood out to you or maybe had a surprising component that you think people should be more aware of?
The expectations. The expectations was so prevalent through all of my interviews with both the students and the parents that it ended up being like the main piece of my dissertation, my takeaway from that.
Yeah. And so as you interviewed adults and their parents through this process, did you find any contradictions between the two?
They all matched pretty well. The first interview I had was pretty powerful. And I think that that was the only one where I didn't see things coming together. The young adult's perspective of how things were done was not really on, it wasn't the same as what the parents had alluded to. Yeah, it was very different. She had a lot of anger and resentment about decisions that were made. And I think she, just couldn't couldn't let go of that because she felt like it had affected her so much socially.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, as you collected your data and came to some conclusions, what were the big takeaways for you in this study altogether? And it's something that could relate to what's happening in the classroom today and for parents. So, what were those big takeaways and things that would be good for people to know?
Well, to have realistic expectations. And with gifted parents, that's not always the case. And so when you have like these big expectations for your child just because they are highly intelligent, that puts so much pressure on them and they can't deal with it. And what happens often is that there becomes like a pushback or a rebellion, and they just refuse to do anything that they're expected to do. So I would say you have to make sure that, you have realistic expectations, and more importantly that you kind of check in with your kid and talk to them and kind of get a feel for how they feel about what's expected of them, and are they having a lot of stress because of the pressures. It's just really important, I think, to keep an eye on their mental health, because things get very overwhelming for them when they're not measuring up to level they should be, or they think they should be.
Yeah, is I'm wondering about the element of expectations on oneself as a profoundly gifted human and what you expect of yourself. And maybe that is because of the expectations that have been put on you that you develop some idea of this is what I should be doing.
Hmm.
Have you seen through your research that there is a higher instance of depression and mental health challenges for profoundly gifted students?
That has been my experience. That's what I've seen in through my research and what I've seen in real life. There is definitely some connections there.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing for parents to be aware of whether your child's gifted or profoundly gifted, or just to consider that that could be something that's being masked as well as the mental
Hmm.
health struggles, and to really, like you're saying, to listen to your students, to ask the questions of your kids,
Hmm.
and to let them drive what the support could be.
Yeah.
So you are currently developing an online school for gifted, creative, and 2E learners. I'd love to hear more about really the impetus for that, and how that's going and what you see the mission of the school being.
My friend and I had a program back in South Florida together many years ago, and we both moved out west, different states, but we're on the West Coast now, and have been really talking a lot over the past couple of years about doing the program again. But obviously, since we're not together, we can't do an in-person program. And I don't know, we just said let's do it. Let's do an online program. We've always been thinking about having like a science focus, but the why is really because gifted education is non-existent in many states. In fact, I'm in California, and unless you live in one of the larger counties, there aren't that many really in the state of California. And where I am, there's virtually nothing. I just really thought that if we put something out there that had the environmental focus, and that if we were willing to work with twice exceptional students, that we could really, really fill a need for people to have different options besides just homeschooling or suffering through public school when there are no gifted options.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like born out of your own family's frustration, and glad you found Davidson. But are there any aspects of that experience that you see are being pulled over into the creation of this school and really what the teaching and learning could look like?
I think that the biggest takeaway that I had from the last program that I was working at a small private school for gifted students was the model they had was an inquiry based model, and the students had so much freedom to take their own path on what they wanted to really dig deeper into. I really loved the idea of children being able to drive their own learning. And so I want to once again have that type of school that it starts basically as student centered. But we're planning on bringing in lots of projects for kids to work on together. We'll probably do some of like the national programs that are put out there for science.
What grades will you be starting with once your school does open?
Okay, so we are hoping to start our first year with grades 4 through 7. And when there's a need to, we will extend up to 8th grade. But really, starting with that middle group, middle intermediate group, and see if there is a need for it to come down lower, into the primary grades. But for now, we'll just focus on the intermediate grades.
And do you see this being available nationwide, internationally? What subgroup are you going to be targeting initially?
Well, initially, we're targeting anyone, anywhere. There's no restrictions on anything. However, based on the fact that we are going to have a synchronous environment, it really probably needs to work with like Pacific Standard Time or Mountain Time, maybe even Central Time could work, but just because of the time change, the time differences, rather, I think that we're probably going to end up with more people on the West Coast.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what have you guys decided to name it?
The name of the school is Sierra Gifted Environmental School, and that came from its parent company, which was Sierra Gifted Educational Services, which is a nonprofit that I started after grad school with a couple of other people from my cohort. And we started out in the pandemic, and it was a little hard. It was a little hard to get things going. We were doing online classes and different fun areas, but it was just really hard to get going. And then unfortunately, everybody got busy doing other things, and the company sort of got put on hold for a bit. And now that I am trying to start the school, we're going to use Sierra Gifted Educational Services and everything that we set up with that, and just, change the name to Sierra Gifted Environmental School.
And so are you hoping to launch this fall of 25 or what does the timeline look like?
Yeah, we're hoping to launch in the fall of 2025.
How can people get more information about the school if they're interested in seeing if their kid is a good fit?
If people want to get more information on the school that we have starting up in the fall, they can go to our website for starters, www.sierragifted.org. And on our website, we do have a couple of options. People can reach out to us through email, or they can call us through our phone number that we have there under the contact us section.
Okay, great. That's great. And I'll have this all linked on hex24press.com as well so people can get to your site from there too. So, in thinking about educators who want to better support our underachieving 2E students or gifted students, do you have any advice for them or mindset shifts that might be helpful?
For me, I found the most important thing to be building relationships with students. They deal with so much stuff before we see them. Many of them just don't even trust adults, and they don't feel like they're understood by them. So for me, working with gifted, highly gifted, profoundly gifted kids, the key has always been just to really get to know them. Patience, time, listening to them. And that's the only way you're really going to know what the child needs, because with children at the upper levels of intelligence, they're not all the same, and everybody's going to need a little different approach.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. As we close out, I'd love to know just what's giving you hope right now in gifted education. We have a lot of heaviness happening in our country right now around public education and what the future might look like. But what is giving you hope and making you optimistic for our future for supporting exceptional students?
Well, what does give me hope is seeing that there's more focus on profoundly gifted in the past, say, 5 years, even since I graduated from University of Denver and did my dissertation. There's been a lot more stuff out there for profoundly gifted kids. So I find that to be hopeful. There's a lot more programs for them in school. I mean, I wouldn't say there's a lot, but there are more options now. I'm even seeing a lot of co-ops through homeschooling.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think ties back to what you were saying at the beginning of our conversation around building community and helping find other families who have profoundly gifted students and getting those students together. And so even just the idea that people are talking about PG more and coming up with more community groups, it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
well, thank you for spending some time with me. I'd love to have you back on in a few months, once your school's up and running and just hear how it's going and the successes so far. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Meryl. Thank you.
This episode of Exceptionally Speaking is brought to you by Hex 24 Press, where education meets imagination. I founded Hex 24 Press in 2024 to uplift educator voices and provide a publishing home for myself and other educators to bring our work into the world. You can find more information about today's guests, including links to their resources and services, at hex24press.com. Thank you for supporting educators, independent creators, and small business. We're so glad you're here.